Hello, and thank you for joining this Cure Connections program titled The Psychological Impact of Ovarian Cancer. Now, there are many important aspects to cancer care, and one very important factor is ensuring mental and emotional well-being. Today, we will discuss the various stages of a patient's journey with ovarian cancer and provide insight on what steps might be taken to improve their care. Hi, I'm Dr. Shubham Pant, a medical oncologist in Houston, Texas. Joining me today to share her story is Doña Harman, as well as her physician, Dr. Ramez Eskander, who is an assistant clinical professor of gynecological oncology at the University of California, San Diego, Moores Cancer Center. Lastly, I'd like to welcome Dr. Jeremy Hirst, Associate Director of Patient and Family Support Services at the UC San Diego Moores Cancer Center. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's begin. Doni, I'm going to start with you. You were diagnosed with ovarian cancer approximately about 3 years back. So just walk us through your diagnosis. How was it diagnosed, and what were the next steps that you took after the diagnosis?
So in the summer before I was diagnosed, I started noticing swelling in my abdomen and some irregularity. And just, I remember being in the ocean with my granddaughter and her kicking her legs and having this sense like, I don't want her to kick me here. And that was unusual, like pretty athletic. And so I went to the doctor and got an exam, and she said, I think you're fine. Maybe you could lose a little weight, maybe exercise some more, drink more water. And then I remembered that my dad died of cancer. And before he died, he said to me to watch for cancer in my late 50s.
And what age was he when he was diagnosed with cancer?
He was in his 60s.
60s.
But he had been going to a doctor for a number of years and told him, watch for cancer. There's cancer everywhere in my family. And they didn't diagnose it until it was everywhere.
So sorry.
And so he passed in his late 60s. But I heard his voice. I heard his voice all those years later. I thought, oh, I'm in my late 50s. I better go back to that doctor. So I went back, and she was on it. She just said, let's go get an ultrasound, and it was diagnosed pretty quickly after that.
So that's great. So you advocated for your own care. You went back. You were proactive, and your dad, your dad's voice kind of helped you and guided you through that. That's just amazing. Mm-hmm. So let's say you went, and then how was it diagnosed? Did you get an ultrasound, or did you get blood? And they said, this is cancer.
An ultrasound followed up by an MRI.
And they said, this is cancer. And then what was your reaction to discovering you had cancer? Was the first thing, did everything like just freeze and stop? Or what was your reaction to getting this diagnosis?
It's kind of a fog. It was 3 years ago. So I think in some ways the body makes things a little, I can't remember exactly how I felt. Certainly it was a bummer. But I had so much support around me. And there were all kinds of little things that came together. One of was my daughter's dearest friend was in her fellowship, her final year as a gynonc. Mm-hmm. And when she found out I had cancer, she called up my daughter and she said, I have the perfect doctor for you.
And that's the one hopefully sitting right next to you?
That is this guy right here, yeah. She said, excellent surgeon, and your personalities will mesh. And that was so important because you're traveling a long road with somebody, and to have that trust to put your head down, do the work, be a good patient, show up and just work through it day by day. That was a huge difference. I was really fortunate to find Dr. Eskander.
So your friends and family really helped you find the right direction. Did you start, do you remember if you start, Googling it the first day, trying to figure out, where things are? You Googled Dr. Eskander, saw his good-looking photograph, and said, this guy looks like somebody who could take me through my diagnosis. What was did you already research him before you went and saw him, or did you just go by people telling you that this would be a good doctor to go to?
I really trusted her. I've known her since she was 3, and there's a special thing about Dr. Codini Longoria, and so I felt really good. It's a very confusing world. You need surgery like yesterday, so you don't have a lot of time to research. And I had seen another doctor, and their approach was, I think I remember being told in the waiting room that this was going to be a cakewalk. She said to me, if I was a dentist, this would be like filling a cavity. If I was a pilot, this would be like flying to, a commuter flight.
Okay.
And I just remember that that didn't
Right.
resonate with
That's a
me.
little bit more
So
serious.
yeah.
And did you have any previous knowledge of ovarian cancer? I know you had cancer in the family, but did you have previous knowledge of ovarian cancer? Did a friend or somebody have it? Did you have any understanding of what this was and what the journey would be?
A distant friend I knew had it, and but I really had no experience with it. It was quite the shock. I didn't see it coming.
Okay, Dr.
Yeah.
Eskander, tell me, when patients show up the first time, I mean, how do you, not calm them down, but how do you kind of reassure them about it's going to be fine, or this is more serious? Like, I'm sure you see patients in different stages. Some are, yes, they could be surgical candidates, some not surgical candidates. Like, what is your reaction? What kind of steps do you take when you see a patient for the first time?
I think just like my conversation with Doña when I saw her in the office with her family, I think the priority in the initial visits is to make sure that you're listening to the patient's concerns and questions, but also to give them a foundation and an understanding of the plan and the steps moving ahead. It's a long process, and there are pieces of information that we gather along the way that are independent from what the initial presentation may be or what the initial scans may show. So I like to emphasize in the beginning, this is the information that we have. There's some more information gathering that we need to do. And then regardless of what we find, we're going to synthesize a plan that's going to be appropriate for your care. And many times it is obviously an overwhelming conversation. There's a lot of questions. So I encourage families and patients to reach out and ask me any questions they have in the first few weeks, as well as throughout the entire process, but certainly as they're digesting this information and learning more about their diagnosis.
Dr. Hirst, so do you see, what is your thought about patients who just first are diagnosed with cancer and the reactions that you see in your practice?
It's often a reaction of extreme stress. I mean, people describe it as if they've been hit by a truck all of a sudden. I mean, most folks are swimming in the ocean, like Doña was, sort of totally fine, and then all of a sudden start feeling something wrong and get this life-altering diagnosis. And people react in a variety of ways, but frequently initially terror and sort of a desperate search for some answers and trying to get control back. That idea of losing control is quite common, of like, oh my gosh, everything was sort of laid out in order in my life. I was, a grandma, I was working, I was whatever, and then all of a sudden we get this cancer diagnosis that really shakes everything up. And so I think, as Dr. Eskander says, coming into the doctor's office is sort of this first place where they're able to get some control back, and hearing that information, even though there's still some unknowns, allows like, okay, now there's a roadmap, and starts letting some of that terror go and feeling like, okay, now we've got some steps to take moving forward. That's sort of a very typical way. Other people are very sort of practical. Okay, I wasn't an expert on cancer, but over the past 24 hours, I've read everything there is to know about it, and I know what we're going to do, and like I'm calm and collected. Others, it's a sort of a feeling of denial, like, no, this can't be happening to me. I'm going to put off getting care. I'm going to put off coming in. It's
the whole spectrum.
Exactly, the whole spectrum.